Welcome everyone to tonight's February 4th, 2021 meeting of the Mansfield Board of Education. My name is Kathy Ward. I'm the board chair. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. This meeting is physically closed to the public, but the public may view the meeting live at mansfieldct.gov/video or on Charter Spectrum Cable Channel 191. Celeste, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Kathy, you're here. Susanna Everett?
Here.
Martha Kelly?
I can see that Martha's on her way in.
Okay.
As are a couple other people.
Okay. David Latrico? You're
here.
Okay, you're here. Edith Allison?
I'm here.
Catherine Hollis?
Here.
Elizabeth Verge?
Here.
Kelly Zimmerman?
Here.
And Rebecca Aubrey?
I'm here. Martha Kelly is here.
Okay, yeah, I have that, Martha. Thank you.
Okay.
Rebecca Aubrey?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Now facilities maintenance planning, Kelly. You're on mute, Kelly.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second of our budget workshops. You received a packet in the mail today. In there should have been a folder that looked like this. We have somebody coming in. It's not a name I recognize. Hold on just a second. Let's see. I was in a Zoom meeting today where the wrong link was sent to somebody and they entered the wrong meeting. Amanda?
Oops.
Yep, see, she must have gotten the wrong link somewhere. Okay. So anyways, you received a manila folder today in the materials that were sent to you, and in there are 2 slideshows if you want to follow along, as well as a spreadsheet of facility needs that will be discussed this evening. And I know that sheet can be hard to see on the screen, so I made sure you have a paper copy of it. We're going to begin the evening with an overview of what's been happening in facilities as it relates to upcoming budgets, both this year and in the future. This is something we've done for the last several years. And while we do that, we'll also talk in a little bit of detail about what the needs are for the current year. You're also, if you don't have it handy, you're also going to need your budget book, and I'll direct you to the sections that we'll be working in as we go through the budget book tonight. We're going to start with Alan Corson, Director of Facilities. I've asked Alan to prepare a little bit different presentation for you this evening. Usually we find a time somewhere in the year for him to share with you the work that's been done to maintain our facilities over the last year. What I asked him to do tonight is look at our facility upgrades that we've been able to provide specifically at the middle school over the last several years. Reason I asked him to do that is because when we talk about this planning spreadsheet that we've used every year, you're going to see that we've, over the last 5 years, been able to address a tremendous number of projects. And I'd like you to see the scope of that work so that we can talk with you about what's left at the middle school as well. First, I want to give my thanks to Alan and Bill Treach, our Deputy Facilities Director, because the 2 of them have put a tremendous amount of effort in the last several years, keeping us focused on understanding both what the needs are at the middle school and ensuring that we can address them. And they've really had great results. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Alan, who's going to walk you through this first set of slides. And Alan, I'll pull those up for you now.
Okay. So the presentation's broken down first, where we'll take a look at the work that we have done to support the needs for the schools in regards to the pandemic, and the efforts that we've made there to help make things as best as we can in the schools. And then I'll be taking you through the middle school through the years. I'll look at the middle school and the different work that we have done there to make improvements, and then we'll be looking at future needs. So I want to start off first with a thank you to my staff, both custodial and maintenance, for all their dedication. Quite a few of them are doing quite a bit more hours than normal, and they've been doing that consistently since the beginning of the school year to help in the extra cleaning that we need to do. So very much thank you to everyone. One of the things that you see here that we've had to do, and I know the plastic over the fixtures don't look good, but we're trying to get some distance, some space there. But everything got automated so that you don't have to touch the fixture. Again, a few more things to include soap dispensers that we also set up with automatic soap dispensers, and sinks, because we already had a push button kind of style. You can touch it with the back of your hand, but you don't have to turn it off. So it's not necessary to turn it on. Water coolers, we have gone through as many as we can, and we've put bottle fill stations on that are touchless also. Plexiglass. We've used a lot of plexiglass throughout as people felt that they needed the different barriers and where they needed it, that we put up, along with different cautioning tape that we have up that we can use as a barrier.
I just want to jump in here and mention that all of these plexiglass barriers were custom designed and built by one of the maintenance staff.
Correct. And we quickly had to secure plexiglass because we thought many things had a jump on where everyone was getting the same supplies. Plexiglass fortunately did not run out, so we been pretty good getting it, even though we did make a jump on getting some. And these are some more areas that we set up plexiglass. Hand sanitizing stations pretty much at every entrance for the use of people as they go in the buildings. Storage containers. Every school received storage containers, mostly to store furniture so that we could free up some space to get the distancing we needed in the classrooms in the different areas. And again, it's a little hard to see in this picture, but there's some barriers set up along with the spacing of the tables that we assisted in doing at all the schools.
There's been a tremendous amount of moving and removing of furniture, moving things to the storage containers, sometimes taking things out of the storage containers. It's been a lot of effort this year.
And then this is the beginning of our middle school, taking a look at what we've done over at the middle school through the years. One of the first big renovation projects that we started on was for the heating system over there. We were all electric heat, but we switched over to a modern natural gas heating system along with a cogen system. The unit you see in the center there, that's sort of bluish to the right in the center picture, that's the cogeneration. It's basically a car engine that runs all the time, and we take the heat off of that to add that into the building heat. So during this season right now, we get about half the heat, a third of the heat between there from that unit. One of the things that went along with that heating plant is we had to take down all the ceilings, so you got new ceilings put up, along with new heating units in all the classrooms and areas. This is one of the modern air handling units. This is what they call a DOAS unit. And that's somewhat the brand name, but it also is a unit that takes air out of the building, but it goes through what they call a heat recovery wheel. So it exchanges the heat and the cooling in this unit. So it's a very modern unit. It takes 100% outside air into the building.
So again, this system was put in about 10 years ago. I'm not sure it was exactly 10 years ago. but it was a real blessing this year with the ventilation needs around COVID. So the middle school has really one of the best ventilation systems that you can have
Correct.
For this time.
I have a question about that unit. Is the new roof going to be put on in that section?
It is, yes.
How are they dealing with that?
They will curb up underneath it. They're able to get it the way it sits a little bit off the roof, really, even though you can't see it from that angle. But it sits about a foot and a half off the roof, and then they're able to get up underneath it, and they roof it right up underneath.
Okay, so a lot of other renovations and projects, many of them within the last 5 years.
The exterior there that used to be a gray color, and quite often you would see a little bit of rusting on it. This was all repaired and finished off with a green finish on there, so that we made that look a little bit better. These are gym pictures before the main gym, and this is after. Likewise, the locker rooms, these are before pictures. And this is the after result of the locker room renovations.
Question. In the locker rooms, were the showers taken out?
The shower rooms or the gang showers were taken out, mostly converted to storage area. But right near where they used to be, we have individual showers that people in dressing rooms now. And they're also handicap accessible in there.
That's a good,
That picture right there?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's sort of back where you see the bed there, back to the left side of that bed is the shower. They probably are not using the shower too much in there right now, so they have that there.
actually, the bed is there because this is one of the isolation rooms for children who become ill during the day. It was a requirement for reopening schools. So a little bit different use this year. But yes, we did make sure that the locker room renovation project maintained showers. But Catherine, did you notice this? This is the old shower. This picture and this picture.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because I'm under the impression since cell phones came out that people are kind of discouraging students from taking showers at school.
Mm.
One of the other projects that we tackled there was we switched from fluorescent to LED lights. So that happened also. At the same time, we did transformers. The old ones you could pretty much cook an egg on. These new ones you can touch and you won't feel much heat at all on those. So not a waste of energy. Bathroom renovations. These are some of the before pictures.
At this point, Alan, every bathroom at the middle school's been renovated?
That is correct. Outside of in the media center, but they were already fairly new anyway, so.
And every bathroom's been renovated in the same fashion, right?
Correct. We installed a new clock system there that's now, it's a wireless one, but it's a master clock system, so that everything will keep the same time, all rooms. This is one of the new dividing walls. There's 4 altogether that divides classrooms. We have done 3. There's 1 more to go that you'll see later. So, flooring, the first floor, we replaced the hallway floor tile down below. We've also done some carpeting upgrades throughout the school. There's some more to go yet. Again, some more carpeting upgrades. The tech ed, we spent some time in there redoing the floor with a nice new finish and cleaning up that area a little bit also. Cabinet replacements, we have done a lot with, we pretty much got through all the science labs now, and it's working now on the individual classrooms and getting those upgraded. That we're going to be looking for again a little bit later. You'll see that. And these are some more of the cabinets. They definitely dress the room up a lot nicer than what they used to look.
And I'll mention again that these were all installed by maintenance staff who were able to do the custom cabinetry work. So this work's been done through a combination of many strategies, very careful budgeting, use of additional funds whenever they were available. We've been putting them back into the facilities, and some good hiring to give us the maintenance staff that we need that have the skills to do this kind of work in-house, which also saves us money. And again, Alan's careful planning, that colored spreadsheet we show you every year has come in very handy. It has allowed us to be ready to go whenever we have the opportunity to do some upgrades.
We've also made some improvements to some of the older air conditioning where we've put some spot cooling in for some of the areas that needed that. And those are 2 units you see there. This is hot water heaters that we've, last year I think I had showed everyone 2 old hot water tanks. The picture on the right are the new ones now. Instead of being really big 300-gallon tanks, these are smaller one, and they heat the water faster, and you don't store as much water, so they're a lot more energy efficient. The dishwasher, we replaced the older one with a newer style dishwasher. And then we also had put in a walk-in freezer and refrigerator, and there's a blast chiller in the middle there for quick freezing, things like vegetables. And this is the old fire alarm system.
I should also mention that several of these projects were financed through capital improvements from the town, a fire alarm system being one of them. And again, I think the careful planning that Alan's done has allowed us to have a reasonable request almost every year. So again, step by step, we've been able to take care of a lot of things at the middle school.
And this is the new system that replaced it. A lot more, like most of you know, computers, they get about 10 years old, 12 years old, they become obsolete. This is basically a new computer system that runs the fire alarm system. Stage flooring, we put down a cover over the wood floor so that it was better for productions. The black surface is something that works well for their shows and performances. New doors, a little bit later you'll see some of the old ones still, but these are some of the new ones that we did, where you'll notice there's less glass around them, and they're very nice compared to the old ones. This is to say that we're replacing that this year, so the new roof is coming and a new solar installation for this summer.
So the next thing we want to do is take you through what's going to happen this year, our budget requests for facilities, show you what's left to be accomplished at the middle school. And we have a few more pictures to help you understand what some of the needs are there. So at this time, I'm going to ask you to take out your budget book. We are in section 4. And I'm going to ask you to turn to page 80. And we'll address this again when we go through the page by page of the budget book. But I wanted you to see that this is where we identify the operational needs. And Alan's got a few highlights for you on this, and then we can also address any questions if you have them.
For my operating budget, there's been some adjustments between the lines. I keep track of expenses for each location. You don't see that here, but it's in my breakdowns. And then for me, I've looked for a little bit of increase for the services of some of the maintenance, like the boilers and rope courses was another item. and then small increases between the building and equipment repairs.
And we will have another opportunity to look at this page again, but I wanted you to know that overall, the operating budget for next year, which always has some funds in it to support maintenance and replacement of some of these items, is remaining, actually it's gone down some, but that's mostly due to salary adjustments, but it's remaining pretty flat for next year. This is probably more important to think about. You may recall when we first presented you with this facility planning spreadsheet, it was 4 pages, one for each of our schools. And we identified the projects that we saw as critical in the next 3 years, as well as the projects far to the right that we thought would need to be addressed in the next 5 to 10 years. Projects that didn't have an immediate need, but that were going to need attention. When you were first presented with this, the font was smaller because there were a lot more lines on the page. And what you can see is that there are not a whole lot of projects left. We've identified some projects that will continue to be managed or addressed this year through either operating budgets or some possible year-end funds. And then we've identified some of the things for the next 3 years. Most of them are continuations of what you have already heard Ellen talk about. So there's another folding wall that needs to be replaced. There are some more exterior doors. We want to continue to do some cabinetry work. New this year is some sealing of a brick veneer. Ellen will show you that in a moment, and a request to Town Council for another significant capital project for the generators. And again, Ellen will address that. What I want you to notice, though, is that for the next 3 years, many of the projects, as I said, are just continuation. By chipping away at this little by little, we're doing a very nice job of updating the middle school. Once you get beyond the year 23-24, the projects that are remaining are much bigger ticket items. The elevator, which still does break down every year and causes us to scramble, is not code compliant. And the only reason we are able to continue to use it is because we're finding people sometimes who can make parts for it. And it should be replaced to be code compliant. We already have at least one student I know in a chair that has a hard time fitting in the elevator, as well as getting some equipment in that elevator can be a challenge. You'll see a pretty big expenditure on here for floor tiles also in the priority 1 column. There's only so much flooring you can replace before it either becomes disruptive to replace it or before you lock yourself in to maintaining those floors for a long time. The reason I say that is because one of the challenges that we know we have at the middle school is that the 50-year-old design of classrooms is limiting when it comes to some of our instructional practices. And we had talked back when we did our facility study about 5 years ago now, we had talked about the educational needs at the middle school. And we've been reluctant to do too much with the flooring until we have an idea of what kind of direction might be taken with the middle school. And another issue are windows. And again, Ellen's got some pictures to show you of that. The point I want to make here is that we will continue to address the items in the next 3 years columns. But at some point, we will need to have a conversation about the long range plan for additional facility work at the middle school. I think you know that if you were to do a major renovation project, that there would be some reimbursement available from the state. By continuing the pay-as-you-go model, we're managing to make some upgrades, but not certainly any design changes to the building. And it is 100% taxpayer money versus a healthy reimbursement rate reimbursement for renovation, I think you know, is over 70% right now for us with the state.
Kelly, can I ask a question?
Sure.
For the elevator, I mean, this is something that is, I think, has been discussed since I've been on the board. Why aren't we putting money in any of the other columns to put towards repairing it or replacing it?
Go ahead, Alan.
I would say the main reason right now is because you might have to move the elevator from where it is to get it to the size that you need to. So that would possibly mean renovating an area. You might put it to the complete other side of the building, maybe where the portables are, out that way. So if you built it onto the outside of the building, probably a little cheaper than if you try to replace it inside the middle of the building and trying to get that space. So without having that vetted out yet, that's somewhat the reason.
I don't know if you're familiar with where that elevator is. It's literally in between two stairwells.
Yeah.
It's just a small shaft. It can't be enlarged there, and it can't be replaced because I don't think they make elevators like that anymore. Is that right, Alan?
Correct. It would be definitely a bigger elevator. It's too small.
Is it ADA compliant?
It is not.
No.
So I'm thinking that should be a priority.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with you. It's a big ticket item, right? As are these other things. Let's show you some of the pictures so that you have an understanding of some of the other projects, and then I want to come back to this conversation. I also want to just mention that you will see that we're still including some funding next year to maintain the roofs at the elementary schools, because every summer, as you know, we have to do a little bit of repair on those roofs. But that is obviously the only elementary project moving forward for the existing schools. So we once again will request capital funds. That's another way that we've been able to manage many of these renovations, because the town council has been generous in giving us up to recently $150,000. And we will request that again to take care of these items next year. We'll talk about these first, and then we'll talk about what's left on the spreadsheet.
These are more exterior doors. Again, you can see the difference between the new and the old. We're here a lot more glass, and we get rid of the glass and we put in a door that's not, obviously that's not rusting away. So this is the last partition wall that we had. So this is to get that one updated. More cabinetry still to do. There's quite a bit throughout the school, so it'd just be to keep working on that. Brick ceiling. This is both the pointing of all the mortar that you see there to fill any holes and gaps that over the years happens, and then it's to actually put a sealant on the brick to keep moisture from infiltrating into the brick. Generator, biggest building in town, smallest generator in town. This is this generator does not run that new boiler room you see to the back there at all. So if we were to lose this during the wintertime, we would have to rush. We do have a portable one we can bring in to run the boiler room. But outside of that, it does not run many lights in the building. It does run some refrigerators in the kitchen, in the freezers, but and run some of the telephone system and the computer system. But that's about the limit to what this generator runs.
This is a separate request to town council, a replacement cost of about $360,000.
Correct. And this is past its life cycle in the sense that generators are rated for about 20-25 years. This is now past that life cycle. And what we're looking for is a generator that would run the building.
Is this natural gas?
No, this is a diesel generator. We could use natural gas because it is available there. The line for natural gas runs right into that boiler room out back you see there.
Would the new one be placed inside the building?
Probably not, because its size is going to be pretty sizable. it would probably be outside.
Okay.
It could still be, this is sort of back of the garage, so you don't see it. It'd be probably about 2 or 3 times the size of what you see there, but it would still be somewhat hidden from the view.
Would it have sort of a protective shed on top of it a little bit?
It would, yes.
Totally exposed. Okay.
It would. That, and we'd probably fence it in just to keep anyone away from it.
So this, now we get into the big ticket items that are left.
These are the items in the future columns, the priority 1s and priority 2s, but the electrical, when we had done that project to eliminate a lot of the electric heating units throughout the school, there's a lot of these panels that are actually not too much in them anymore. We went from so much power to about half the power that we originally was using. So there's a lot of vacant electrical panels. There's a lot of old electrical panels that over time, usually 30, 40, 50 years, it gets hard to find switches to go in those anymore. Usually you have to get it from a place that will stock them. Peeler Electric does do that, but even that's starting to get short on supply for these.
And Alan, I see that's at about $440,000 estimated.
Correct. The other side of that room has what you call the main switch gear, so it's even bigger electrical gear. And I didn't get that in the picture, but it is there. So. Windows, we're going to try this year to do something to at least paint over the frames of these so they don't look this bad. We'll probably do some color painting, but I really didn't, and we don't want to get into scraping them too much or anything because of the potential of the caulking on these windows containing PCB. So beyond that, these are older windows that are double pane. Now you'd probably do something with a triple pane in here.
So window replacement is a significant item at the school. It affects, of course, not just the viability of the window, but also your heating costs.
Correct. And the functioning of those windows.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. Classroom modifications. This is the art room for the most part that you're looking at here, but this is one room that we feel could use some definite upgrades.
We know that all of the arts rooms at the middle school have, the arts programs have overgrown or outgrown the rooms available. So not only is the art room a very small room for the type of programming that goes on there, but so are our music rooms. There have been some modifications in the last 2 years made to the orchestra room, but for the most part, orchestra now operates on the stage. And you saw some of the upgrades that were made to the tech ed room, but that's another room that is very, very tight because of some of the work that they're doing with computer technology in that area. I mentioned to you also space for students to learn in more flexible ways. We have, I think, a real dead space in the middle school with the cafeteria. It's a large space in the center of the building that is designed only to be used a few hours a day. So I think if you want to consider any kind of a project beyond the small upgrades that we've been doing at the middle school, I think that the priority areas would probably be the arts and that cafeteria area, so that we can provide some more flexible opportunities for students. And then you could also, at the same time, likely address the windows and the flooring and the upgrade to the electrical system. The other thing you'll notice on your spreadsheet is a sprinkler system. The middle school does not have a sprinkler system. At the time that the middle school was built, it was not required. And so just like our elementary schools, there are no sprinklers. There will be in the new school, but there are no sprinklers in this current school. So that's the end of the slides. And I know this is a budget workshop and a budget presentation, but I wanted you to be aware of the facility needs, not just for this budget, but for your thinking moving forward.
Kelly, this is Rebecca Aubrey. I had a question a while ago, and I was having, as Zoom likes to tell me, an unstable internet connection. But it was back when we were looking at the bathrooms.
Sure.
And, my question was, I think, more direct. I guess it aired everybody, but I was going to say Ellen, but I think it's everybody. I was just wondering to what extent we've considered making sure that we have gender neutral bathrooms, both for students and for faculty. I know that was a discussion in the new elementary school building, but I was curious about to what extent that's been a discussion. And personally, for me, I think that should be a priority as we're doing bathroom remodels, to make sure that there are gender neutral bathrooms, both for students and for staff.
Probably 3 or 4 years ago now, the middle school did identify certain bathrooms as gender neutral. They have in the library wing, where Alan mentioned we didn't have to do bathroom renovations. Those are single stall, handicapped accessible bathrooms, and those are now gender non-specific bathrooms. It was also something that a lot of conversation was had about when we were renovating the locker rooms to make sure that there were opportunities for students to have some privacy in those locker rooms, so that we didn't have greater concerns for gender non-specific students.
Thank you, because I actually appreciated Catherine's question about the, I think Alan called them gang showers. I remember those. I still have traumatic nightmares from my 5th grade PE class, where we were told we had to shower in one of those. And I think, Catherine's point was well taken, not just because of the emergence of cell phones, but also because of privacy for students and respecting students' privacy and their gender identity and all of that. So thank you.
I wanted to know if you could discuss the demolition of the portables. Is the idea to demolish them and to replace them, or what are we thinking about there?
So I think that's a conversation that needs to be had in light of the entire building. We know that the portables have also outlast their lifespan. There are some, I'm going to let Alan talk about the condition of them, but there are some repairs that need to be made to those regularly. We're reaching the point, we're not there yet, but we're reaching the point with enrollment at the middle school where we may not need those additional classroom spaces. So I think it needs to be wrapped into a bigger discussion around a good facility study of that building. Alan, do you have anything you want to add about them?
Not, I would agree 100% on that. And I think, definitely there is some more work to be done on those if we are to keep them, i.e. some of the air conditioning is failing on that, and we'd have to replace some of the bigger units. We've done some small renovation with small units to put in there to replace the bigger ones, but we'd probably want to go back to some better units.
When was the last time a facilities study was done on the middle school?
I had not seen a facility study done in my 20 years of being here. So I would say if there was one, it predates the 20 years I've been here.
Okay, now I asked because a few years ago, there was a $12 million plan to do work there. And I just suppose that if you're going to spend $12 million, you would have a facilities study as a basis.
What's the $12 million?
It was to refurbish the middle school. And I just sort of assumed that if there was a $12 million plan to refurbish the middle school, that there would have been a study to support that.
When was that plan? Oh, I'm sorry, Alan, go ahead.
There was a condition study done for the 4 schools, and I believe it was wrapped into that, but it wasn't real extensive. It just looked at conditions, not necessarily the needs. So it did have a condition study done that I remember that dates back to Bill, with Bill Hammond when he was there. It was probably about 15 years ago.
Is that the time frame you're thinking of, Martha?
Oh, it was at least a dozen years ago. It was a while ago. It was wrapped into the first time, maybe it was sooner than that, because it was wrapped into the discussions about the first discussion we had about building a new school building or combining buildings, and the $12 million to refurbish the middle school was in there. And I.
Correct.
Martha's correct.
Yep.
It was with the original study for the school renovations that fizzled.
Right. So nothing ever came of that.
No.
No, but I just assumed, looking back all these years, that there had to be some underlying research to decide why we need to spend $12 million and how we're going to repurpose the building.
Yeah.
That was the impression that was left, Kelly, and it was before your time, so.
And before Alan's, it sounds like, too.
Oh, absolutely before Alan's time.
Yeah.
Alan, I think Alan was Bill Hammond's assistant, second, whatever. We liked it when you talked, Alan.
Thank you.
If I could just say, I believe I have that report on file.
Okay. So why did we show you all this tonight? So for a couple of reasons. First, I really do want to applaud Alan and his staff for the work that's gone on at the middle school. I think it's pretty impressive to see the cumulative work over all these years, and to know that in light of everything else that's going on in the district, we're doing a good job of maintaining the building that we intend to keep operating for several years. Also, because if you'll recall, just prior to the pandemic last year, we had started some conversation about, we had promised the community that we would look at all of our facilities. And so we knew what was happening with the elementary facilities. Was it time to have some conversation about the middle school? We had just started that conversation when the pandemic hit and our attention was turned to other things. We also, in that time, up till today, have a new town manager, and I've had some conversations with him. I think it's only right that anything that we do or recommend, because we won't have the authority perhaps to do a big project, so anything that we would recommend to the town needs to fit within the plan for all of the town's facilities, because I know that there are many needs that the town has as well. And Ryan Aylesworth has only been here a few short weeks, but I know he's interested in looking at all of the community's facilities. And so at some point, I do think that the board should return to that conversation about the condition of the middle school and the degree to which you believe it's helping you meet your educational goals, so that if there is any interest in pursuing more renovation, real renovation at the middle school, that we can begin to have some conversation with the town about where that might fit in what I hope will be a master plan for the town with all of their facility upgrades that are needed.
So Kelly, what you're saying is that the town council would make the decision as to whether we continue to do this piecemeal, or we package it all up and look for state reimbursement.
Well, they don't. Yeah. So they don't really make that decision per se, but if you think back to the process that we went through for the elementary schools, you conducted a facility study to determine the effectiveness of the facilities. You then engaged in much more study to come up with a recommendation for what you wanted to do, and you recommended that we build a new elementary school. You then made a request to the town council to form a building committee. And so what I'm saying to you is you can continue to address the needs at the middle school by asking for capital funds every year. Like this year, we have to ask for $360,000 for the generators. You could continue to do that, or you could engage in a deeper study of the middle school and perhaps come to a different conclusion and make a request to the town council. But the work begins with the board. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you. Kelly?
Are there any renovations to some of those older rooms that you were showing, like the art room and technology, that ventilation needs to be improved in light of COVID world?
There has been some. In the art room, we added a couple of units that do extra air cleaning in there specifically just because of all the dust. So there's 2 units that have HEPA air filtration in that room to handle that. The industrial arts room already had, they were included in one of those DOAS units, so they do have one of those that serves that area.
So again, not necessarily a discussion or any decision that you needed to make tonight, but in consideration of the budget, we are proposing that we make a request to the town council for $150,000 of capital funds to support ongoing upgrades and facility needs at the middle school, plus $360,000 for the generator. And I've tried to give you the big picture view of the middle school in the with the recommendation that you may want to come back to a larger conversation about how to begin to get your hands around the needs and some possible recommendations for what to do in the future at the middle school.
I'd just like to say to Alan, what a great job done this year. And some of these renovations that have been done, like the locker room, are amazing. And, you know, I hope you thank your staff.
Thank you.
Alan, I do want to go back to the elevator, but I just want to say that I'm really impressed with the caliber of people that you have under you with the cabinet designing. I mean, I'm just amazed at that. I used to do a little woodworking. It's just very impressive. Very impressive.
Thank you. And we're trying to buy a very good quality cabinet, and we're able to do that and get everything mixed together because we're using in-house labor to do that. So
yeah, it's definitely cost saving. On the new elevator, the amount of dollars you've put, is that including the idea of moving it and building an outside?
No. That did not originally, no. It might be able to handle that in that price, yes, but that was just looking at some sort of replacement.
Only.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I would say probably, Alan, in all honesty, those columns on the 5 years and above, we probably haven't pulled new estimates on those in about 2 years. Is that right?
Correct.
Alan, I'd just like to echo what everyone else said. Amazing job, you and your staff. And when you take a look at everything that's been done over the past 4 or 5 years, it's incredible. It really is incredible. And I really also appreciate your efforts to conserve energy.
Well,
greatly appreciate it. It's a wonderful
thank you.
job.
And a lot, we can't do anything without your support, and you've been very supportive. So we very much appreciate that also.
Alan, I
Lots
just
of good
also
thing to support you. It's a
I'm
great
so
job.
sorry. Sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
Susanna?
I apologize. I'm having some technical issues, but I just also, since we have you, Alan, on behalf of all of us, if you could also thank you and your staff for all the incredible work you're doing for cleaning our buildings and keeping them safe for our kids. I think it's become sort of routine at this point, but it's not routine whatsoever. So we really appreciate that as well. So just wanted to underline that. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. I'll share that with everyone. Thank you.
Anything else, Kelly?
No, that concludes facilities.
Anyone have any more questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you so much, Alan.
And Alan, you're going to stay around for a little bit?
I'll stay around for a little bit. I'll be in the background though. So.
Okay. Good.
Shall we move on to budget discussion?
We can move on to the district management areas of the budget. We're going to be in tab 4. So if you have your budget book and you want to open to tab 4, we have some other people here to join us this evening who I'll be calling to speak to you as we get to their pages. But essentially, we're going to go through all the pages in tab 4. This first slide you've seen before twice, just gives you an overview of the total budget. I want to share with the public that we, on, Friday afternoon of last week, we received our award allotment for the new federal stimulus funds. We've received about $400,000. It's money that can be used for a wide range of COVID-related expenses, and it's money that can be spent through the 21-22 school year. In fact, the end date on it is September of 20. Oh, actually, I believe it's for 2 years. The end date is September of 2023. So it's a 2-year award. We are required to complete a needs assessment in order to complete the application to demonstrate how we will use those funds. That application is due February 22nd. So Charmaine Bradshaw Hill and I have started the conversation to begin looking at our needs and conducting that needs assessment. I'm hoping that I can come back to you next week before you have to adopt this budget with a revised proposal that allows us to apply some of, if not most of, that award to costs in this budget related to COVID. So those would be things like additional staffing, for example. And that by applying those award dollars to this budget, I will be able to decrease the requested increase and the percent of budget increase as well. So I will, sorry I don't have that for you tonight, but it just came to us too quickly, but we will be sure to have that ready for you next week so that you can consider that as you decide what to do about adopting this proposed budget.
I have a question about the stimulus fund.
Sure.
Are the dates bookended? I mean, is it for expenses beginning a certain date and ending a certain date?
So yes, they have to. The expenses have to be incurred shortly after the 23rd. September 23. They told us that I think there's a 90-day period that by which they all need to be expended after the end date. So after, and I don't know if it's September 1st or September 30th, but they said I think it was a 90-day window. Charmaine, you can correct me if I'm remembering that wrong. And as far as the start date, that question was asked in a webinar that we were on earlier this week, and they needed to confirm the date, but they thought it was January 15th of this current year. So the bookend would be January 15, 21 to 90 days past whatever date in September they give us of 23.
September 30th, 2023.
September 30th? Okay.
Yep.
I had a question. In light of our discussions last week, it really seemed as though elementary schools especially, but I would assume the middle school as well, had formed their technology budgets with the assumption that we would have that technology in-house position to be helping to support teachers and to be doing things. And in the way the budget was presented, it seemed as though that position was related to a COVID expense. So I definitely understand how we could use these funds to fund that position for this year, but I was going to ask if everybody would be in favor of moving that to be a permanent position. So maybe that is a later discussion, because I see the value in keeping that technology going even once the pandemic is done. So I just wanted us to have some kind of conversation about that piece at some point, because I think in the short term, using COVID funds, if we can, to help pay for it really would make a lot of sense, but I don't want it to just go away either.
Okay. Okay, I'll move on if there aren't any other questions. I just want to remind you that these are the things we'll be talking about this evening in the district management budget. Those of you who've been through budget reviews in the past, this will be familiar. salaries and benefits, technology, professional improvement, library media, the administration work that we do, so Board of Ed and Superintendent's Office, obviously facilities again, transportation, and a few items that are transfers to other programs. Within the district management budget, you'll see that we did have some reductions in early retirement, in energy, and in equipment costs. And we had some increases, and our greatest increases are in this part of the budget outside of negotiated salary increases. There's increase for medical insurance, our municipal employee retirement system, which are the fees that we pay into the pension system for non-certified staff, unemployment compensation, slight increase in transportation. You'll show you that in a moment. That is a smaller increase than in the past. And there's a small increase in our shared finance and IT services. So I'll get us started with the professional improvement budget. This is maybe found, what page we're on, sorry. We are on page 74. Did I say that? Yes, page 74. We're going to be bouncing around a little bit tonight, I think. On page 74, this is the fund that includes the stipends for our team leaders, the funding for district level professional learning, and our contracted reimbursement of teachers for their own continuing education beyond the master's degree. And that's a contracted allowance. Overall, this budget is flat funded. You see an increase of $650. And now I'm going to have you look at page 73. And we have Jamie Russell here this evening, who's going to talk with us about the information technology budget.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you everyone for taking some time tonight to talk about this. In the first slide, I'm just going to talk about this briefly. I want to talk about how we develop the technology budget each year. IT staff, school staff, central office staff, we all work together collaboratively on this. Looking back, at least 3 years back, we take a look at what the school and district goals are, and also what feedback we have from teachers, administrators, even many times students about the technology we're using and the direction we're going in. And then we take a real close look at the equipment we have now, what kind of replacement needs are coming up. And we've gotten real good at this and have a high accuracy in predicting that. And then the final piece we do is we look at all of our current vendors. We don't take anything for granted. We look at purchases, subscriptions, and we seek opportunities to negotiate better pricing, look for alternative vendors, look for consortiums, and look for things that are open source or free. The result of that is the computer ed budget that you see in front of you in your binder. Some things I wanted to highlight, both about the current year and the year coming up. Our one-to-one program, we provide a Chromebook to each child in grades 2 through 8 and provide an iPad to each child in K and 1. This is a result of feedback we got from faculty and from students. We found that the Chromebooks are an excellent choice in grades 2 through 8, but the iPad interface is better for our youngest learners. The way this works is each student is assigned a device. That device is something they use in school. And one of the changes we instituted partially in the spring, but fully this school year, is each child also brings a device home as well, which is a real exciting development. Obviously, COVID drove a lot of that, but it's really exciting from an equity standpoint, knowing that all of our kids, regardless of the technology they have or do not have at home, now have access to the device. And also, it's really helped us in terms of providing learning tools. Two of the key ones that I've listed there in our upper elementary grades and middle school, all of our teachers are using Google Classroom as a learning management system. And in our younger elementary grades, they're using Seesaw as a learning management system. Because all students have access to technology and have access to consistent devices, it's really facilitated the use of online software and technology resources across all our students, and knowing that everybody will have access to it. So this has been an exciting piece. It's something we're very committed to and are finding is very successful. I did want to talk as well a bit about the COVID response, which certainly had an impact on this year's budget, and we're being thoughtful about it for next year's budget. The one-to-one program I just talked about has been a tremendous piece of that. When students have been remote, whether that's our families that have chosen to go fully remote, or whether that's children who've been partially in school, partially remote, that's been a huge part about delivering instruction. We've used a variety of online software. Like I mentioned, we have some core learning management software there in Google Classroom and Seesaw, but we've seen an explosion in other software that faculty have used. A lot of this has been faculty generated, administrator generated. It's real exciting. And as part of the budget process, we've been thoughtful about thinking about which items have proven successful, and we want to continue those subscriptions next year, and which items were ones people tried, but maybe don't make sense to continue system-wide or just make sense to continue in small amounts. A big part of the COVID response, as you know, has been Zoom, the same platform you've been using for your Board of Education meetings. We've been using in all of our schools. This has been a really successful way, again, both to address the families that have chosen to go full remote and for children who have been in school some and some remote. A big part of this response this year was providing a webcam in all of our classrooms, which because of shortages in stock proved to be an especially challenging piece to accomplish. But we're happy that everyone did. They all have it, and that's been a big piece. For our kids, because we have that one-to-one program, all of our Chromebooks come with a webcam embedded in it, and all of our iPads have a webcam embedded in it. So it's not just the instructor, the staff member who's delivering their video, but also the kids as well deliver it back, which really tries to add in that human piece, which is particularly important when kids are remote. And finally, I wanted to highlight connectivity initiatives. While most of our families do have internet access at home, that is not universally true, or in some cases they might have access at home, but maybe you have a large number of students, maybe you have parents who are having to work remotely and their remote access, their internet connections being overloaded. So we worked real hard on that this year. We were fortunate that we're able to work through the federal government and the state government. There were some initiatives that provided some support for hotspots and also for some subsidized Charter Spectrum internet connections. We're also we're able to partner with some other districts. We were able to identify some districts that had purchased some hotspots they weren't using, and we were able to make use of them. And then finally, we were able to use some of the COVID funds we received to also support that. Because we recognize that, you know, if kids are going to be working remotely, if internet connectivity is not available or not reliable, then that's a huge barrier to learning. And I think we've been real successful in supporting our families and helping to address that. I did want to highlight as well, I must confess, I smiled when that came up earlier in the meeting. Really appreciate your support of the technology integration specialist teacher. That's been a tremendous benefit as part of our COVID response. The individual in that position, Karen, has done a tremendous work, and there's a lot of things we did this year that she was just instrumental in. It really makes a difference having someone who not only has a comfort in technology, but really has a comfort in instructional practices. We have very good teachers, but when you add technology into that, that obviously adds other challenges, whether that's technology remotely or in the classroom. It's been a real benefit having Karen kind of help us think through those hurdles, work one-on-one and in groups with teachers and paraeducators, secretaries, administrators, and families and students as well. That's been a nice piece we've been able to include as well, is try to provide supports for homes as well. We've really seen, as a result, both through Karen's work and frankly because of the necessity of the pandemic, some real growth in how people use technology. It's been really exciting to see among our faculty, people making comments like, wow, I never thought I'd be able to do this, or I've never been this confident in my usage, or I never would have thought to try that. We're making sure that that helps us now during the pandemic, but that's not something that we want to lose. Obviously, we're going to continue to support those instructional uses. And I feel like our faculty is committed to that as well and is excited that even post-pandemic, we're going to make use of these things that we've learned. For the coming year's budget, the overall is there's no increase in the computer ed budget. I did want to highlight a few changes in that budget. You do see in your binder a reduction in supplies. There's a couple of reasons for that reduction. One is we've reduced toner use. As you know from previous presentations, through your support, we were able to switch off of smaller, less efficient printers and instead move to regional managed printers in our buildings, which has significantly reduced our use of toner. But we've also seen that with the shift to virtual resources, with kids collaborating online, using those one-to-one devices, we're just going through less physical supplies from a computer perspective. So that's been real helpful as well. You'll notice in your binder some adjustments in the software subscriptions and equipment. Those all balance out and are net neutral, but I just wanted to reference, we look at actual usage from year to year. Sometimes we need a little more equipment in one building, a little less equipment in another, a little more licenses in one case. And so that's why you see that natural adjustment. And then finally, I wanted to highlight, you're going to notice a significant reduction in repairs and then sort of a matching increase in maintenance. The reason for this is as we've shifted away from desktop computers, in which case it was usually more cost effective to buy repair parts. And instead, we're now on one-to-one devices like Chromebooks and iPads, which tend to be more self-contained. It has made more sense to more often, in effect, repair those through maintenance contracts. What a maintenance contract does is it saves us in two ways. Is we go with large distributors who can get parts at a much lower price than we can. And also those distributors often will do the labor for us. And that's been a really important piece. Because as you can imagine, with providing 1,100 devices or so to kids that they use all day and take home, we do see an increase in the need. And so part of how we've contained that cost is through those maintenance contracts. Because if we had to provide the labor for all of that in-house, we'd run into issues with needing more labor and costs associated with that. And then the next slide is the final one I'm going to speak to.
Hold on, Jamie. I think there might be a question.
Yeah. No, I had a question. You're talking about repairs. How are we finding when students have the iPads at home and the Chromebooks at home? Is there a lot more wear and tear on them, or what's the experience now?
Sure.
Jamie, sorry, this is Jamie. Sorry, this is Rebecca Aubrey. I actually had a question to just kind of add to what Martha just asked. I'm just curious what your turnaround time is when students express, I think it's folded into Martha's question, when students express that they're having tech issues with a device that they brought home, what your turnaround time is to address it.
Yeah, no, that's good. Those two questions are related, and I'll speak to both. First, in terms of Martha's question, we are seeing more wear on them, in terms of the usage of bringing them home and so forth. Some of the strategies we've used, we've gone to cases that are more appropriate for travel with both the iPads and the Chromebooks. They're kind of these hardened plastic cases that snap on, and that has gone a long way towards addressing that. Whereas when we were only keeping them in the classrooms, we didn't find that was as necessary, so it wasn't universal. Whereas now we've universally done that across nearly all the devices. So that's gone a long way. We have been working with kids and teachers around strategies for how to keep your device safe, what are do's and don'ts. I think that's going a long way as well. So there has been some increase, but we're seeking to manage it. That is partly why we do those maintenance contracts as well, is that manages the potential cost. A lot of those contracts, even if we see an increase in repairs, we've kind of got some built-in warranties there that help us too. As far as turnaround time, so what we do in each building is we have what's called a loaner pool. So that if a child has a device that's not working, either because the child identifies it, the parent identifies it, or the teacher identifies it, The child doesn't have to wait until it's repaired. What they do is they're given one from the loaner pool, which is, same quality device, good working device. So that way they can immediately receive something that works. And then when we receive the item, sometimes it can be repaired quickly. But frankly, because of COVID, we found with certain models, there's quite a backlog in the required parts for it. So sometimes it can be quite a delay. But from the child's perspective, it doesn't impact them because they're using the loaner device.
And I had one more quick question. So these families have the units at home. Are there stops put on what sites that they can access?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. With the hotspots do have what's called content filtering, which limits what you can use them for. Say no content filtering is absolutely perfect, but we found they work pretty good. So that helps. The other piece, and that's with those hotspots, the other piece that helps is when you're using one of our devices, one of our Chromebooks or iPads, there are some built-in safeguards as well. Again, they're not perfect, and we, real upfront with families that, it's important for them to be involved as well. But those safeguards do put some important limits on what you can do with our devices. The only other piece is the state has been subsidizing those Charter Spectrum internet connections. Those don't have the content filtering of the hotspot. However, as long as they're using one of our devices, we've got some limits on our own devices, and that helps a great deal too.
Is there any way we can check to make, random checks to make sure that nobody's treading where they shouldn't?
Some of that does actually occur through some intelligence on the devices. With the pieces we have in there, there is some alerting that occurs and has come up where it will identify that there's a concern, it alerts us, and then we work with the administrator who then works with the family. So that does happen. It's kind of artificially intelligence-based, so it kind of proactively tries to identify that.
Thank you. There's so many ads now that pop up on things that it's very easy, especially if you're young, to just click on something and you don't know what you clicked on.
Sure.
And so I'm not saying that this is purposeful. It's just the way that the programs are designed these days. So
yeah,
vigilance is so important. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome.
Jamie, may I ask a quick question too? Oh, I'm sorry,
Sure.
Kelly. I apologize.
Okay. No, it's so hard on this sometimes, isn't it? I was just curious how long these devices tend to last, and just reaffirming that the commitment is there to keep them as one-to-one even past COVID.
Sure. Yes, the commitment is there. What we're finding is typically we get about a 4-year life cycle out of these devices. Now, sometimes you get a little more, sometimes not. But from a budgeting standpoint, we budget and prepare for a 4-year cycle, so that way we know we can commit to it. And we budget looking both at actual student counts, but then also we factor in that loaner pool, knowing that there's some degree of in and out based on repair needs. So it's, you in effect have one for every child, but then you've got an extra percentage to fund that loaner pool. And yes, in building the budget, we're committed to that. It really is instrumental to how the buildings operate now. And so it's certainly post-pandemic for sure.
And what devices do we provide to each of our teachers?
So for our teachers, typically it's a Chromebook. However, if I'm a teacher who teaches at K1, for example, typically we also make available an iPad. There are some cases where instead of a Chromebook, a laptop was a better choice for a teacher. So there's some variation there too. But typically the teacher has a Chromebook. Younger grade will also have an iPad. And frankly, we have some teachers at other grade levels who have iPads for various reasons as well. And sometimes a laptop. And then, of course, always, a desktop computer in the room as well.
One more question. Have we recycled the desktops? There are so many in the rooms. Have we cut down on those and recycled, repurposed them, or what are we doing?
Yeah, that is correct. There are significantly less desktops now than there once was. And that's something that's been occurring over the last 2 to 3 to 4 years. So it's been a gradual process, but it's significantly less now. Most of our rooms have 1 or 2. There are some exceptions where there are more for various reasons. An example would be like our makerspace rooms have banks in some cases, or there's certain classrooms where it makes sense to have banks. But we have significantly less than we once did. So that is correct.
I have a quick question too. I'm sorry to jump in. Just one last thing, Jamie. How you speak to a little bit about how we're supporting student engagement. I know that's been really tricky. That's a hard thing to do with when kids are remote, but just kind of different ways that you are doing sort of technology-wise to support kids' engagement.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question because it is a challenge, particularly when kids are remote. And, you know, they're like the other things competing for their attention, so to speak. So some of the things that teachers have found effective and that we work with teachers on, the video piece is huge. We find it is really important that kids have their cameras on. Obviously, staff always do, but kids as well.
I apologize. I don't have my camera on. I'm also having tech issues, but so go. Thank you.
Understood. And it kind of goes both ways because, you know, it's helpful for the kids' engagement because they feel like they're part of a class because they're seeing their colleagues. Obviously it's important they see the teacher, but a lot of times it's important that they see each other as well, we've found, because then they feel like they're part of a class community and so forth. And it's also just engaging for them because they're curious to see their fellow students. So the camera is big. A lot of our teachers have been real creative about building in things in this remote environment, doing things like breakout rooms would be an example. They can use Zoom to kind of put kids in smaller groups who can collaborate and work together and then pull them back and have them report. A lot of teachers have had a lot of success. They've been using these things called document cameras where you can share materials live with everyone who's kind of on. Certainly picking software that's engaging. Ensuring that kids are active learners. I think we should be real proud of the fact that, you know, when you look at what our teachers are doing, I'm sure sometimes you have to do the traditional stand and deliver, so to speak, instruction. But honestly, that's not the dominant instruction that I think we're seeing across Zoom. I think teachers are being real thoughtful about having it be collaborative, having it be discussion-based, having kids be active learners. And that goes a long way, partly because it keeps them accountable because they have to contribute, but partly because I just think it's more exciting and interesting for the kids. So I've been real impressed.
That's great. Thank you.
One more question. You mentioned Makerspace. Is that part of the national franchise? I know that there is a huge Makerspace place in East Hartford. So is this part of the same movement?
Conceptually part of the movement. I don't know that any of our schools are per se formally affiliated with that. But in our schools, basically what that means is in some of our rooms, you have like, you know, maybe 4 or 5 computers, a bunch of physical materials, blocks, building things where kids are creating stuff. There's some rooms where they've used some printers that physically print items. Obviously this year, given COVID, that's not as accessible or possible as it would have been pre-COVID. But that would be an example of a room where it makes sense to have some traditional computers because sometimes a Chromebook or an iPad just isn't powerful enough to do that.
I have another question as well, and I don't know if this is more aimed at Kelly or at you, but I'm curious as to whether we have an actual like computer education plan as a district that we are following. Like, I think everything you're doing is wonderful, but I think it would be in good interest of our district to really spell out and create an outline. And I don't know if that exists already, so I apologize if it does.
Sure. I can speak to that some, but by all means, Kelly, you jump in as well. There's a couple of components we have. One is we do have a curriculum team that is focused on combined library and technology information skills. And that team consists of both IT folks, so to speak, and library folks, but also classroom teachers as well. And what our work is involved is we've been looking at, much as the math team's been looking at language arts, science, and so forth, and looking at standards per grade level, goals, what learning looks like in terms of information, in terms of library, in terms of technology in today's world. The concept behind that is that helps to update our instruction, gives us a chance to have a sense of how we're doing, kind of measure ourselves and so forth. So that's a big piece. We do have, I would say, plans in terms of the equipment and software side of things, but that's probably less of what you meant. You probably meant more in terms of the curriculum and instructional piece. The other component that's informed a lot of it is the 5 Cs. That's been a big piece. We've found that a lot of folks, implementation of the 5 Cs has real implications for not just use of technology, but use of information in library. Those are my thoughts, unless Kelly, you have differing
I'll just
views on
add
that.
a few other pieces. This year, as we knew that we were going to have remote and hybrid when we opened, we also identified a core set of foundational programs. So making sure everybody knew how to use the learning management systems of Seesaw and Google. That was one of our programs. Zoom was another one. There's a student learning software called Frickle. That was another one. So I think we identified 4 total foundational platforms, we called them, that we made sure everybody used and had an understanding of. And then the other element of a technology plan when these were written was really thinking about how do you acquire and maintain technology equipment. And at this point, I would say our schools are fully operational when it comes to technology. So the connectivity, the infrastructure behind the wiring and the wireless systems, as well as the devices, we're fully formed at this point. And so our plan is Jamie's good budgeting for the replacement work.
This is Rebecca Aubrey. I have a kind of a follow-up question and maybe a comment and a philosophical rambling. Kelly, you were talking about some specific instruction with specific technologies, but I was also thinking that teaching students like digital literacy is kind of like the way we teach some of their other learning. And it's even as, I'm trying to think of how to put this into words. Technology is so rapidly evolving that by the time we finish teaching them how to use something like Seesaw, something else has emerged. And so I think historically we looked at technology education as a separate class, but it's so embedded now in what students do day to day. And I think even probably more important is just like instead of teaching students, we want to teach students how to be learners in so many ways. And part of that is learning how to use technology. And it's less about a specific technology as opposed to how to adapt to different technologies as they emerge, and how to be an inquisitive user of technology and a safe user of technology, an open and exploratory user of technology. But, I guess kind of my question or my philosophical rambling, or maybe that was part of it for Jamie, was I hope that we have in our budget. I admire greatly your job. I think your job is probably one of the most challenging because you need to prepare for what we don't know yet. And the way technology evolves so rapidly, as you write this budget and think about what we need next year, technology by then is going to change. And so I hope that within the budget that we have for professional development, that there's opportunities for you to be exploring what we don't yet know about educational technologies and platforms that are coming out that we aren't even necessarily aware of yet. And I guess I'm just wondering to what extent the budget considers things that might emerge between when we pass this budget and school starts or halfway through the year, to what extent do you have flexibility to make some pivots because something even better has emerged versus waiting a whole another year for the budget process, if that makes sense?
Yes, that does. And thank you for those comments. Those absolutely echo with me. With your thoughts on in terms of digital literacy and integration and so forth, I gotta smile too, because you've been listening in on our curriculum group, it seems like, and not literally, but it's as if you are. That group that I referenced between library, technology, information skills, that's exactly the kind of conversations we have. So it's neat to hear that echoed. And that's philosophically the approach as a district we emphasize and take is that it's not a standalone, it's not something that's separate, but it's something that integrated. And part of what we see that curriculum group's role is to identify those items and continue to as they evolve and share those with faculty, work with faculty about how you implement those in units and so forth. We do have flexibility in terms of as things evolve. I'll give you an example. I referenced earlier the document cameras. That is not something we anticipated would have the kind of growth that it has had. So that's something where we hadn't necessarily thought it was going to be as successful and important as it's been. But we saw a significant change. Part of it was we had access to a newer type of document camera that's a little more flexible. And so we were able to pivot. We intentionally budget, but we also make sure that we're thoughtful not to just say spend it all out in July, so to speak, so that we can pivot. And then from the professional development standpoint, we do include funds for our own professional development, and that's a huge piece. This year they've been mainly online, frankly, obviously due to COVID. But the other piece that's been great is just the discussions we have in district. It's been fascinating how many times, whether Karen LaFave was the technology integration teacher, there are times we sit around and talk, new ideas come from it, or there are things that she hears, I hear, other folks hear from faculty, generates a discussion. So we absolutely do PD from outside the district, but it's exciting how much of that kind of comes in-house because someone, whether it's Karen, a teacher, whomever, sees something, tries it, and then it kind of spreads like wildfire. So
Jamie, I transitioned to the next slide only because I think you're starting to address much of what happens with the capital improvement dollars that you're provided each year. So these dollars give you that flexibility, I think, that you were describing, and also
Absolutely.
allow us to do the regular upkeep and replacement.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great segue. So our CIP, our request and capital improvement project request remains the same as it's been in recent years, no increase. We are, just so you know, sometimes people think capital improvement means like, oh, something fixed to the building, like wiring inside of it. We are past that point. The kind of things we are buying are things that are not generally permanently affixed to the building. Where that's particularly helpful is everything we're buying on the elementary level is going to come with us to the new school. But it kind of underscores that earlier in this process, when we started doing the capital improvement requests, which are now, I don't know, probably 10 plus years back, we were trying to catch up. We were trying to kind of create that infrastructure. Whereas where we are now is we have effective technology use already. We already have a good system in place. What we're doing is continuing to support it. And support kind of takes on the 3 points I have here. One is replacement cycle, where there are items we're using that are going to continue to be used and make sense to replace. The next item is sort of what you were getting at there. It's as the technology changes and evolves, that there's new ways to use it. Maybe an old usage is no longer relevant. Change in software, change in hardware, an exciting new development, maybe a requirement increases. An example of that is we've seen our bandwidth needs have increased, the amount that people use the internet as they use video and multimedia. And then finally, kind of these compatibility and security updates as the technology standards change. So when we plan for it, we look at what we have, we make sure we're budgeting for that replacement, But we also know that we have to budget for some of that. It might not make sense to replace, but it might make sense to change. So for example, in the current year's budget, some of the things we focused on were, we had instructional projectors that service the whole classroom, that some of them needed to be replaced. This was the final year of that project. We'd started in previous years. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we switched over to more high efficient printing. We had some work we had to do on our virtual infrastructure just to handle the increased demand we've seen largely because of COVID. But the biggest chunk is that classroom equipment. Some of it is those one-to-one devices, some of it is the webcams, the pieces that get used hands-on. The document cameras were a huge piece this year. Many of those we had planned for in advance, but some, like the document cameras, required a pivot. In the coming budget year, and then I'll conclude, we know that we have at the middle school level a number of interactive display panels, what you traditionally think of as smart boards, that are due for replacement. So we'll be working on that. The technology has changed, so it's not exactly the same thing anymore, but it's that idea of having the touch interactive whole classroom interaction piece. We know that there are some pieces we need to do in terms of bandwidth, which is the fiber optic. We have some school security pieces, some technology that we wanted to implement. And then finally, again, the biggest piece is that classroom equipment. Much of it is replacement, but also some of it is deployment of new technology as things evolve and change.
Any other questions for Jamie?
Jamie, I would just like to say, as with Alan, we can't express our appreciation enough for everything that you've done to keep this school system in this town running during this crisis. So just thank you. Just wonderful job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I wanted to include with just sort of publicly thanking the team. And I mentioned Karen Lefebvre there, the technology integration specialist, has done a huge job, but also everyone on the IT team, technicians, network administrators. The past 12 months was not like we would have ever expected or ever experienced. And really have been proud to work with all of them. And they have found really creative ways to come up with solutions to a really evolving situation, and real proud of the team we have here.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. Jamie, are you still dividing your time between or among the high school, the town, and our school district? Is it still
correct? Yep.
It's still set up like that. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Martha, he has a little more staff than he did a few years ago, thankfully.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, that's what makes it
but
possible.
I just, I assume this is a way for the high school that we can integrate, and it's a stream that goes throughout our whole pre-K through 12 system.
It does, yeah. And that's one of the things that I enjoy about that. A lot of the things we talked about tonight are the same challenges that we've been working through at the high school this past year. And a lot of these ideas came, an idea came up at the high school and then blended at the elementary, middle level, or vice versa. So that's where we benefit from that. And I'd be remiss to say, truthfully, it's also through other districts. There's been a lot of collaboration this year among Connecticut districts, not just our neighbor districts of, say, Ashford and Wellington, but all of them, about everybody's trying to tackle these problems quickly, has kind of encouraged all of us to collaborate more.
I just want to say too, I think, that's something that pandemic really has brought about is this awareness that there's such a technology gap between students and teachers. And I feel like a lot of what has been reported is going on in the district is helping to bridge some of that. I think it's really hard for some older teachers or younger teachers who just haven't used technology to figure out how to incorporate that. And I think it's something that we wouldn't have known we needed to focus on had the pandemic not brought it to light, but it really is an issue because that gap is just going to keep widening unless we're giving teachers those supports and we're, helping them through all of the technology going forward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that wholeheartedly.
Okay, thank you very much, Jamie.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the information. Next up, we have Dr. Robinson, who's going to speak about media services and library, and you'll find that information on page 76.
Okay.
75 first, and then 76.
Yeah, they're kind of all together. Good evening. Thanks for listening. Gosh, we've been going an hour and a half. I don't know about you guys, but it feels like the need to move around a little bit. So like Jamie said, I don't think any of us thought that we would have had this last 13 months be what it be. The middle school library, just like all the other libraries, we sent kids home. We were going to be closed for 2 weeks, and we sent them all home with big bags of books, thinking we would be back. And then, of course, that didn't happen. And we all had to pivot and do things differently. And one of those was that we refurbished the lending libraries that we had built around town, because we really needed to get books into the hands of kids. And fortunately, we were able to do some things like sneak into Barnes and Noble, even when everything was closed, and buy thousands of books and restock our lending libraries, actually 3 times during several months, where books just went out the door. I don't know where they went, but they left. The middle school library actually never closed services. We went virtual with curbside pickup, and in some cases deliveries to homes. We actually mailed books home. We had evening book swaps. So we have continued to provide service in all kinds of formats, everything from going to like virtual libraries, taping ourselves, doing book talks, all kinds of remote interactions. When school opened up this year, we have books on carts going back into classrooms. In some cases, the libraries were not able to bring kids in because we couldn't keep them socially distant. But we are providing services and have continued to provide services. Also, things like summer programming. We did a lot of programming to try to get kids connected to teachers and books. Although we do provide a lot of digital resources, we found that our kids who were Zooming all the time just wanted an old-fashioned print book as much as anything else. So we've really been very busy in a different way than we were prior to COVID. I'd love to have the kids back in the libraries like they were, but for right now, we're still doing a lot of outreach and connecting ourselves to the kids. We're also supporting our remote learners. I do book talks every couple of weeks to the kids that aren't in the building. And like I said, we still have book swaps in the evening, so kids can come and pick up books and whatnot with their families. We're also doing an awful lot of literacy support, both digitally and in print. We do promoting of current fiction, and also in recent times, a lot of the push towards conversations on race and human rights. I will say that I feel pretty good about the collections in all the libraries. We were buying books in those areas for some time now. And so although we could always use more books, we have really solid collections that cover those issues. For instance, we're just doing a really cool book clubs in 5th grade with diverse characters and diverse authors. We also buy a lot of ebooks, and since COVID, I have been allowing kids to recommend the books that I should buy in the online databases. We do a lot of collaborating with the district's literacy coordinator. So I meet with her on a weekly basis where we share a variety of ideas and work on things together. And we have some programming coming up. It's a really good collaboration. I also focus a lot, and the libraries do, on digital citizenship. And as you were talking about in the previous conversation, I serve with Jamie on the library technology curriculum team, and that is our philosophy, that things are integrated. We don't teach it standalone. So I do things like push into classrooms. I'm working next week with the 6th grade teachers, and they want to do research online with kids. And so I'm going to be in classrooms planning with the teachers and co-teaching some of those things, so that kids don't see digital citizenship or online stuff as a standalone or something they just do in one place, but they see it in classrooms and in authentic situations. We also have a program in 5th and 6th grade called DOT, which is Digital and Offline Tools, which again is something where we work to collaborate with teachers and they can integrate those things into the classroom lessons and classroom activities, not just pulled out. We've also done some pivoting on the databases that we provide. Prior to COVID, people used them, but they didn't use them as much. And now we've shifted, we've changed some of the things that we purchased so that we have enough online resources for a wide variety of learning capabilities. We've also done an awful lot of work this year and next year, also in the future, on collection maintenance, because moving forward, I have to take 3 elementary school libraries and put them together cohesively into one collection. I now have a plan for how we're going to do that, not only the physical books, but the online card catalogs. A transition we made about 10 or 12 years ago. I used to have a para who used to do the processing for the library, and we eliminated that position, and I took on those tasks myself. Although that's been a lot of extra stuff, we're going to reap the reward because I am the person that puts everything in. And so I've put things in consistently. And so when I put the 3 catalogs together, they should blend much more consistently. So hopefully that will go smoothly when we do that just before the new school opens. We also have a plan now that we can do that, and it's not going to cost us anything. We're going to make that transition happen in-house digitally. So it will be a big task, but I think a good one. So it's been a really crazy last year, but I think a good one. I think we've weathered a storm and made some changes to programming that have made us even more effective than we were before. If you look at the budget, page 75 for media services, you're going to see a reduction of just under $5,000. And really that's because as we move forward, we have shifted from, as a district, from analog to digital, which means that some of the things that were media services, that were things that I was responsible, really are now shifting into IT, into digital. And as we prepare for the 3 elementary schools becoming 1, we're reducing some of the equipments that we don't need to have. We have what we need to move into the new building. So that's the reduction there. And in the library services program, it's the way it was. I don't have any increases or decreases. The only thing I will tell you is that we have lost a lot of books. The change in philosophy once COVID hit for me was I just needed kids to have books. I didn't care how many they had out. I didn't care if what they had out came back, they could still have more. I just needed them to read. The problem, of course, then became is that at one point, for instance, the middle school had like 2,000 overdue books. And quite honestly, families don't know where those books are. And so a lot of them did come back, but we are missing hundreds. And those have all been forgiven. I just eliminated them because I didn't want to stop kids from not taking out more books. So that's where we stand.
And Linda, just to provide a little more information, I do believe some of the extra book expenditures, we were able to get some reimbursement through the early COVID relief funds.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So.
Linda, this is Rebecca Aubrey. I actually had a question poised to ask you, and you answered it before I could ask it. And I just want to extend a kudos to you. And the question I was going to ask is to what extent students have a voice in what kinds of books you are purchasing. And then you went on to mention that you had surveyed students or you had sought some student input. And I just really wanted to thank you for that. I think we often presume that because we're educated and we're experienced, we know what students want to read or what they should read. And I think we all know that students are going to be a lot more motivated to read and to do a lot of learning across the board when they have a voice in it. So thank you for doing that. I admire that. Thank you.
No problem. Well, I think especially The one thing that's been interesting is that now a lot of times I am interacting with students digitally as well, either through, we have some online forms and email. And so kids ask for stuff, and if I can, I buy it. It also means I have to read it because I read everything that goes into the middle school. But you know, it's given us another way to be even more responsive to their needs for what they're interested in.
I also, I don't know if it's a comment or a question, but you know, when you were talking about addressing issues of diversity and equity, you mentioned trying to increase our offerings in that. And this might be kind of like a broader instructional practice question, but I really want to make sure that as a district, we're addressing diversity and equity, not as a standalone topic, but that it's permeated everything, so that no matter what students are learning and reading about, they're seeing those, you know, I can't remember her name, but she talked about the windows, the mirrors and
windows.
Doors.
Right.
Yeah, and revolving doors, and that it's permeated everywhere, as opposed to, you know, a standalone topic. We're going to talk about diversity.
Absolutely.
And so I appreciate that that's a consideration of the district, but I just want to make sure that it's permeating our curriculum across the board.
It is, and I make sure that we, for instance, have a lot of books, and also the publishing industry has changed, so that's helped a lot. But it's not just, for instance, buying realistic fiction books that have racism or prejudice or something in them. We now have a lot of quality fantasy books where the hero or the main characters are of different ethnicities or disabilities or, you know, whatever. And that means that kids can see themselves or see others, even when they read a fantasy. You know, there's just, it's there. It's not the issue, it's there. So I think you'll see
Wonderful.
a lot of that.
I think that's important for, yes, I think that's very important. It's a very
Yes, absolutely. And we're 100% there. And I would say that our libraries have been there for a while. We just keep getting better at it, but we've always had that.
Linda, I would just like to say, I'm sorry that COVID hit and that you have to make so many changes, but man, it's wonderful how you don't get down. You just keep, a challenge comes at you, you just hit it head on. And it's really appreciate that. It's great for the kids, and you don't back away from anything. You just keep going. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Well, you know, we work in a district that we get a lot of support, and that makes the difference also in going that extra mile, because, you know, people appreciate it. So
you definitely go the extra mile, for sure.
I wanted to ask, so the students through their iPads and their Chromebooks can link to a library book and read it online, I'm assuming.
Correct. We subscribe to Overdrive for Education, which is sort of a spin-off of Overdrive. And so I buy books for that. We also own a variety of databases such as Tumble Books, which are animated picture books. So there are any number, or TrueFlix, which are nonfiction books. And they're different formats. Some of them are online in print, and some of them are online, but also audio. It varies from database to database, but yes, they can.
You started this really early, so it's good to build on it.
Correct. Yeah, we've been doing, it's just happened to work out. Martha, you were the one who got me started on the little lending libraries how many years ago, right?
Yeah.
And they ended up being like a home run during this.
Very, very popular.
Yeah.
We have one on my corner, and there's kids there all the time. How's the circulation doing? Can you tell?
It's really hard to tell, I will say. We're down from what we would have been, but I think that more of what goes out is actually being read, as opposed to when kids are not coming down the same way they used to come down at the elementary school. For instance, they came every week. So if the kids took out 4 books every week, that doesn't necessarily mean they read them. So I think now when kids are taking books in and out, at least at the elementary school level, because it's different at the middle school, because the middle school was more an on-demand type of thing, always has been. The circulation at the middle school is still pretty high and pretty strong. And part of that, like I said, I know you balance that with the books that just haven't come back, because we're not stopping anybody. And we used to have a 4 book at a time limit. Now I have remote learners who have 15 books out, but I don't care. You need books, you can have books.
That's exactly the right attitude. They should read. Thank you.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Thank you for giving kids books.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks so much, Linda. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
We have a few more areas of the budget. None of them are going to be as exciting as what you just heard. We'll take you through the book as efficiently as we can. So we're going to move on to page 77, which is the Board of Education. I've got on the screen here a few of the things that you'll see in this account that may be of interest to you, and a note that there is a reduction in early retirement costs. That's a contracted allowance that has been sunsetted. So there are fewer and fewer people eligible for that benefit every year. Next, page 78 is the superintendent's office. This is where we budget for the new communications specialist. I know I had a chance to introduce Margaret Chady to you. She's been a tremendous service to us already. I've shared in the past some of the things that she's done for us already. You'll also see printing and distribution costs in this budget. Many of our district software systems are here, so the things that allow us to do business. And there's an increase of $15,000. Most of that is salary related.
I have a question about the communications person. Do we divide her salary among all the entities in town, or how does that work out?
It's 50-50. The town is 50% and we're 50%.
What about the high school?
She does not work at the high school.
She doesn't do anything at the high school or Eastern Highlands or
no,
or anything like that. Okay, and then going back a page, you have no contingency position. Is that because you have all these other people who are all these other teachers who are hired because of the pandemic?
So we usually identify contingency positions based on enrollment. If we have some places in our enrollment projections that we think might require the addition of more staff, then we budget through contingency. This year, we don't have any enrollments that we think are going to require more staff. So it's not just because of COVID that we don't have a contingency, it's more because of enrollment figures. I'll move on to the business management budget, which is page 79. Not a lot in here, but you will see a slight increase for our shared services, both financial services and IT. We've looked at facilities earlier this evening, but just for the sake of clarity, for anybody who might only look at this set of slides, I've included the spreadsheet that we talked about on facility needs and maintenance needs, as you'll find on page 80.
Can we go back a page after you finish that?
Back to what, business management?
Back to page 79.
Yeah, business management, yes.
I noticed on the shared IT services from 18-19, which was just really like a couple years ago, we have doubled, or nearly doubled our amount of money from 180,000 to 341,000. It's more than doubled. So is that because of the new people on staff? I look at the actual figure, and I was looking at the 1819, or even if you look at 1920.
Right. So
it's nearly doubled from 1920. It's twice.
Right. So there have been some additional staff added in that department. Also, there was a reallocation a couple of years ago of our share of these services, which is, if you'll remember, is dependent upon the amount of use. And I don't remember how all of that was done, but do you remember just a couple of years ago, there was a reassessment of each entity's proportion. And I do recall that our proportion went up somewhat for IT a couple of years ago. Charmaine, I don't know that you would know the history of this. Is that something that you could look into more closely?
I can. I mean, the proportion of the total cost for IT and or shared finance, it's the shared IT and the shared finance, is kept consistently year over year. But there are additional expenditures that have been that manifests in these respective areas. The additional staff, the additional costs for not just their salaries but also their benefits. In addition to that, the new financial management system that is coming online. This has been in the making, if you will, for about 18 months. And so the cost associated with rehauling the entire system is pricey. And that cost is being spread across all the respective agencies. So it's not just the town, the board, and Region 19. It's also those other agencies that I believe Martha was asking about, like Eastern Highlands Health District and so on and so forth. So, but there's a static or standard percentage that MBOE owns from these shared services.
Charmaine, would the cost for the new financial services system be in the shared IT services line?
It would be in shared IT, yes, because it's the actual system.
Well, then that's the answer, because Martha, last year we had an increase of well over, I think it was $140,000 for that system.
Okay, yeah, I thought that was going to be in finance services, and didn't realize it would be in IT services, which would mean that it's spread among quite a few entities.
Correct. Okay, so that may resolve that one. So we were on maintenance needs, where you'll see there's a reduction in some of our energy costs. And as Alan talked about before, a little bit of an increase in our maintenance services and in our equipment repairs. I don't know if anyone has any other questions on that page. I know we still have Alan with us. Okay, I'll move on to transportation. I mentioned that we'd be talking about this. We have negotiated with our transportation provider for a smaller increase next year. So last year our increase was 3.3%. Increase for the upcoming year will be 1.9%. They were willing to do that for us as we extended our contract out for the next 5 years.
Do you think fewer bus runs share as the same as last year, that we'll have that bus expenses will decrease?
I'm sorry, either you or I froze a little bit, so I only heard a part of that question. Could you repeat it?
Oh, no problem. So pupil transportation line 53910 went up $24,000. So I'm just it's proposed to increase that much. So I'm just asking if, because of altered bus routes, because of COVID, with schools being closed and so forth, will that really increase that much?
So we have not decreased the number of runs at all because one of our other challenges this year is keeping students physically separated on buses. So we are still running the same number of runs, and that's what we pay for, is the number of runs. What we're not paying for this year, though, are after-school runs, because we're not doing any late buses, or have not to this point done any late buses or any athletic transportation. We did budget for it next year, though, in the hopes that we're back to that. But it likely will be a year-end savings for us in the current year. Okay, employee benefits. I actually have a couple of things to share with you on this. I think you're aware from our conversations last week and the week before about the increases in health insurance. Charmaine can certainly provide answers to additional questions you may have, but before you ask them, I do want to show you one other thing, and then I can come back to this slide. There was a question last time about the amount of savings that we have or have not experienced as we've changed our medical insurance system from a PPO to a high deductible health care. So this shows you the expenditure since 2017 for health insurance benefits for Mansfield Public School employees, and what the change was from the previous year. And you can see that from 2017 to 2022, we've saved almost $600,000 across that time. So despite a couple of years with some increases, most of those years have been decreases. And overall, we've decreased just under 17% in our health insurance. I'll go back to this slide. Employee benefits also includes MERS, which we talked about earlier this evening, and unemployment compensation, which again, Charmaine has explained to you is a little bit volatile, and it's hard for us to plan for. Are there any other questions about employee benefits? Okay. Next thing we take a look at are some of our other programs. You're aware that we supplement the Suzuki program. We're required to provide nursing to Oak Grove Montessori School. And we're working on getting a good read on food services this year. And Charmaine, I'll let you fill people in on that.
So as I'm assuming everyone is aware that this year, as well as the end of last year, last school year, we went to something called SSO, Seamless Summer Option, which provides free meals, 2 meals a day to all students, whether they are in person or distance learning or hybrid. What that means is every single meal that is produced, there's a tracking system that's in place, and Stephanie, the food service director, communicates and reports back to the state every single meal that is distributed to students, and the USDA, by way of the state of Connecticut Child Nutrition Program, pays what we submit a claim, and they pay for those respective meals. That is all that the SSO program, by way of the Child Nutrition System, CNP, that's all that is covered. That does not cover everything that goes into basically creating those meals. So it doesn't cover overhead costs for labor. It doesn't cover packaging costs. It simply allocates, I believe it's $3.41 for each lunch that we give. And it might be $2.90 something cents for each breakfast. So it's great because kids get to eat. It's great because it's consistent, and there's no worries about, for families, about whether or not their kid is going to be able to have a breakfast or a lunch, or worry about having to make sure they have something for their child when they send them to school. So it's absolutely wonderful that that is in place. It is all throughout the state of Connecticut. So most districts have taken on that program. However, when you are participating in that program, you have to operate in accordance with the guidelines for the Seamless Summer offering. That's number one. And number two, because you've got not all kids coming into school, and also you probably don't have as many staff members who are purchasing meals, you know, in light of the environment that we are existing in. Most folks are either, you know, they're not purchasing, they're bringing their own meals. And so that has cut down. Also, there's that, you know, they're no longer as a community sort of environment, you know, when you go to the cafeteria during your break or whatever. There's not that much of that activity going on because of our particular distancing requirements. So Stephanie is in a unique situation where Mansfield had a wonderful sale of food program, catering for meetings and things like that. That's not happening now. And it didn't happen towards the end of last year either. So that's a huge loss of revenue. So, you know, the meeting that Kelly had referenced that we participated in earlier this week with the state, that question continues to pop up as to how districts are supposed to, we want to produce the meals, we want to be, you know, be supportive of our families and our students, but the state and nor the Fed has figured out a way to cover the overhead costs that are associated with each of those meals that are being produced. So we are looking good and hard at the numbers. We're seeing where we can cut back. We got some reassuring, at least I considered it to be reassuring news on Tuesday afternoon, where there's certain pieces of the meal service program that we could charge back to the respective Corona relief funds that are available to us, such as packaging. I understand that Mansfield went from regular trays to disposable trays. That's an expensive proposition. So all of these items, we're going to, you know, the food service department and finance, we're going to look to see what we can tweeze out and request reimbursement for. But, you know, this is, at this point, we are feeding kids, and Stephanie's team is doing a great job at doing it. The kids are taking the meals. So the interesting thing is our meal claiming has gone up exponentially over the last several months. However, we're not in a position to sell meals as much as we had in the past. So, you know, that's where we currently are. The conversation between food service, the superintendent, and finance is around full offerings and going back to the self-op program that is very profitable for Mansfield in the coming fiscal year. Stephanie will be, you know, has been watching and waiting for, with everybody else in her cohort across the state, for guidance from the state of Connecticut on whether or not they're going to encourage the districts to continue with the Seamless Summer or the SSO program, or if there's an expectation that we will go back to what we've done in the past, or if there might be a hybrid scenario that might come to bear. So we'll keep you abreast of how things unfold when we get the guidance and direction from the state. But again, just wanted to give you a sense for where we are right now. Know that pre-pandemic, this was a very self-sustaining program. It was, you know, I've heard all kinds of great commentary around the offerings that are provided, not just to, you know, to the students and to the staff and the family engagement. So once we get past this hump, your self-op program will go back to its glory days, and I think we'll be in a good place. We just need to wait for guidance and direction from the state, because even though we're self-op and even though she's got a great sale program and a catering program, you all still submit claims to the state for meals for students who who are low income or who have a reduced share of their meal prices. So because you're part of that child nutrition program, we have to adhere to whatever their guidance is. So more to come on that front. This is February. It's likely that we'll get some insight by March or April.
And we'll come back to you in the spring, as we typically do, with a full food service report.
We don't have a page in our budget, or I don't anyway, anything about food service, right?
Not yet.
Yeah, okay. And so we are still offering meals to students at the grammar and the high school with no cost. Is that
correct?
That's true. And do we do something on weekends? I can't recall. And on school holidays?
We're not doing weekends, but we are doing meal pickups for delivery for any student who is hybrid or remote. So there's an opportunity for all students to receive meals 5 days a week.
Even if it's a school holiday?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think just the school operational days.
School operational, okay.
Yeah.
All right. No, I think it's important for people to have food. A lot of people have lost their jobs.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about the summer? Are we going to be doing what we did last summer?
So again, that's part of what we're waiting to hear about. The offering currently is through the school year, so we don't know if we're going to be provided the funding as we were last summer to do summer free meals.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just to close out the evening, I'll remind you that the capital fund requests that Town Council has graciously provided us funds every year for the IT department and for our facilities. I should mention that part of how we've been able to do so much at the middle school is also due in part to us focusing all of these funds on the middle school, because once we made the decision to build a new elementary school, we only did necessary repairs at the elementary schools. And so this number that we request each year fluctuates a bit. It's been as high, I think, at one point as of 200,000, more recently around 150,000. This year we're requesting 115 to finish some of those smaller jobs that Alan spoke to you about earlier this evening. And then we will make the request for the generator, and we'll see if the town thinks that that's something they can support this year. You ask typically for some information on recurring grants. It's not part of the budget book, but we would usually provide that information for you as part of this evening's workshop. And so you have this slide. So again, we don't have a lot to do with this funding except to accept it and use it in appropriate ways. So this is the money that we received in the current operating year. The IDEA, or grants for children with special needs, does not cover full operating costs, but offsets some of our costs. The Title I supports struggling students. The Title II is used for professional development. Title III is shared funds that we receive to support our English language learners. And Title IV is a newer entitlement grant, very small entitlement grant that allows us to provide some academic enrichment, as well as other student supports and family supports. And this is usually monies that we've used to support some of our community events, like the community dinners that we used to do, in fact. And so just to close out the evening, highlights of this year's budget. And again, as I mentioned at the start of the evening, I do expect some of this to change next week, after Charmaine and I have had a chance to take a look at our ESSER fund awards and figure out which of those dollars we can apply to next year's operating costs. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any other questions.
I appreciated having our guests come in tonight and go over the budget. That it's really helpful. You've mentioned before that it really does give us some insight as to what's going on in the big picture. I appreciate that. And great job on the budget. Great.
And I appreciate that this has been a very long evening for you. So thank you for staying with it. We've had 2 meetings this evening, but I appreciate the questions. I will say again, if anyone is looking for other information that would be helpful for you before you're asked to take action on the budget next week, please send those questions to Celeste and we'll do what we can to get you information for the next meeting.
Anyone else have any questions, comments?
I just wanted to quickly echo. It's really, in some ways, that the budget is always an opportunity for us to look comprehensively, and especially this year, to be able to do that and really dive into what's going on gives us like a really complete update on all the things that are happening, which are all amazing. So thank you very much to everyone for all your work on supporting the budget this year and putting it together.
Anyone else? With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Come on now, come on.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Ms. Catherine. Edith? Edith, second. Anyone have any objections to adjournment? With that, I would say it's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone, for your patience and thoughtful participation.